a couple teams that I won't allow him to play for.
Whoa.
This is my profession. I know what's behind the curtain. We ain't got to get back there for me to understand what's not prominent for my son. I'm not doing it.
And if he doesn't listen to you?
Who? No, you must mean owners, like not my son.
Have you told him privately who you would like for him to play for?
It's not like who I would like for him to play.
At the top of the second round, then people view him as a backup. And I'll quote it here, I'm not sure how many teams want that circus in the building as a backup.
First and didn't select him. That means that Cleveland was on the clock twice in the first round, didn't select him. It meant that New Orleans didn't select him. They were on the clock. It meant that Pittsburgh didn't select him. They were on the clock. It means the Giants executed a trade to get back on the clock. They didn't select him. At that point, I knew right then he was viewed as a backup. And once you're viewed as a backup, now it actually becomes more about your personality.
Deion Sanders made headlines yet again, this time not for his coaching, but for his comments about where his son, Shedeur Sanders, should and shouldn't play in the NFL. Reports say Deion openly stated that he didn't want Shedeur suiting up for certain teams, including the Cleveland Browns. And whether he meant it or not, that trash talk may have backfired. Shadur, once projected as a potential early round pick, slid all the way to the 5th round, eventually landing with the very team his father didn't approve of. One executive even remarked, he might land somewhere as a backup, but no team wants to bring in this kind of circus. People didn't hold back after Deion's comments. Many began calling him out for being a bit too greedy when it came to deciding where his son should land in the NFL. Fans and analysts alike questioned why Deion felt the need to control the narrative so tightly, especially when it involved teams like the Cleveland Browns, the very organization Shadur ultimately joined. Sports analyst Colin Cowherd didn't mince words either. He directly pointed at Deion as the reason Shadur wasn't picked in the first 4 rounds. Cowherd called Deion greedy and criticized him for trying to cash in on his son, urging the Hall of Famer to take a step back and let Shadur build his own NFL path.
To tell your kids, be humble. Humility works in the summer, it works in the fall, humility works in the spring, humility works in the winter. Don't gas your kids up too much.
Shedeur Sanders was visibly devastated after not hearing his name called in the first 2 rounds of the draft. Cameras caught the emotion on his face, and while he tried to keep composed, it was clear the fall was weighing heavily on him. But according to multiple reports, the slide wasn't about Shedeur's talent, it was about his father. NFL insiders suggested that teams were hesitant not because of the quarterback's ability, but because of the potential baggage that came with Deion Sanders' outspoken approach. Despite the storm swirling around him, Shadur showed class and humility. He spoke briefly to the media during the draft weekend, and though you could tell he wasn't feeling great, he never lashed out or placed blame. Instead, the young QB stayed grounded, quietly focused, and still determined. But then came the unexpected twist. Shedeur Sanders was drafted by none other than the Cleveland Browns, the very team Deion Sanders had reportedly hoped to steer him away from. After all the noise, all the speculation, and all the hesitation from front offices, the Browns made their move, but not in the 1st or 2nd round. In fact, they passed on him multiple times, only to finally select him in the 5th round. It felt almost ironic. The same team Deion didn't want his son to play for ended up being the one to give him his NFL shot, but on their own terms. Whether it was a message or just business, Cleveland waited, evaluated, and grabbed a talented quarterback at what many now see as a major bargain.
First and didn't select him. That means that Cleveland was on the clock twice in the first round, didn't select him. It meant that New Orleans didn't select him. They were on the clock. It meant that Pittsburgh didn't select him. They were on the clock. It means the Giants executed a trade to get back on the clock. They didn't select him. At that point, I knew right then he was viewed as a backup. And once you're viewed as a backup, now it actually becomes more about your personality.
On the other hand, as all these reports surfaced about Deion Sanders trying to control where Shadur should play, a new wave of criticism started building, this time aimed directly at Shadur himself. people around the NFL began labeling him as arrogant, claiming that his father's outspoken attitude was rubbing off on him. That perception gained serious momentum and, according to insiders, played a big role in his continued slide down the draft board. The situation escalated when legendary quarterback coach Mike McCoy publicly called Shadur brash and arrogant during a press conference. The statement hit hard. Coming from a respected figure like McCoy, it wasn't something the league could easily ignore. And as if things weren't already intense, more voices from the NFL world started weighing in. This time with subtle but sharp criticism aimed at both Shedeur Sanders and his father. A wave of former players began questioning whether Deion had truly prepared Shadur for the challenges of the NFL. They argued that by shielding him from adversity and attempting to control his draft destination, Shadur was never really pushed into the kind of tough situations that forge elite pros. One of the most talked about moments came during a segment with Stephen A. Smith, when former NFL MVP Cam Newton shared his perspective. Cam didn't hold back. He suggested that Shadur has a tendency to shy away from real competition and challenge. He implied that Shedur's confidence sometimes borders on self-absorption, as if he genuinely believes no one else in the draft class is on his level. That comment struck a chord and quickly spread across the sports world. It added yet another layer to the growing media storm, one where narratives about Shedur's personality began to overshadow the conversation about his actual game.
The thing about Shadur, I am the guy that's been pushing him to the greatness. I want to see Shadur picked early. I want to see Shadur picked as the first quarterback taken off the board. But Shadur also does not want to be challenged. I've said certain things that I'm just keeping it a buck and just say how I feel. That doesn't negate how I feel about him, his brother, his other brother, his sister, and his father.
Cam Newton didn't stop at challenging Shedur's mindset. He took it a step further by casting doubt on the legitimacy of Shedur's on-field accomplishments. In his words, Shadur had thrived in convenient positions, insinuating that his rise in college football was more a result of controlled environments and carefully crafted situations than a true test of grit, adversity, or raw talent. Newton implied that Shadur had been insulated from real football hardships, the kind that expose weaknesses and force players to grow. The message was loud and clear. Shedur's journey may have looked impressive on paper, but it lacked the battle scars that come from grinding through tough competition. Deion called out the smear campaign that had taken root during the draft process. He questioned how anyone could watch Shedur's tape, see his tireless work ethic, recognize his leadership, and witness his production, and still claim he wasn't ready for the NFL. In the end, what began as Deion Sanders trying to protect his son may have unintentionally worked against him. Deion's outspoken stance, specifically his desire for Shadur not to play for certain teams, including the Cleveland Browns, cast a shadow over the entire draft process. His attempts to control the narrative and steer Shedur's future created hesitation among NFL front offices. Teams became wary not of Shedur's talent, but of the drama that might come attached. And as each round passed, it became clear that the bold comments were having real consequences. No team wanted to get caught in the middle of what some perceived as a media circus. Ironically, it was the Cleveland Browns, the very team Deion publicly didn't want, that stepped in when no one else did. In the 5th round, they made the call, giving Shedeur Sanders his NFL opportunity. Whether out of belief in his potential or simply good value, Cleveland extended a hand when others turned away. And now Shadur has a chance to prove everyone wrong, not just about him, but about the idea that his career could be scripted by anyone but himself. Sometimes the story you try to avoid becomes the one that defines your legacy. But now, it's your turn. What do you think about the whole situation? Do you agree with Deion Sanders trying to control where his son should play? Or do you believe he overstepped and hurt Shedur's chances in the draft? Was it fair for teams to hesitate because of a father's influence, or should they have focused solely on Shedeur's talent and leadership? And looking back, do you think Cleveland was the right destination after all? Or was there another team that would have been a better fit? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear where you stand on this story.